Immigration. It's one of the most heated topics of our time, right? But what happens when you try to look at it through a purely theological lens? Well, in this explainer, we're going to break down a pretty fascinating argument that does exactly that. We're going to walk through its logic step by step just to understand this unique perspective. And right out of the gate, the source material hits us with this really challenging question. By shifting the conversation away from all the political talking points we're used to, it grounds the entire issue of immigration in theology. And believe me, that one move changes everything that follows. So how does the argument even get there? Well, its entire foundation rests on this one single, really powerful idea, what the source calls the comprehensive lordship of Christ. And what that means is that no area of life, and I mean absolutely none, falls outside of divine authority. You see, this is where the argument just throws out any kind of divide between a sacred and a secular world. According to this view, if even simple daily acts like eating fall under divine lordship, then of course something as complex as immigration policy has to as well. It's a worldview that really demands every single civil law be measured against a theological standard. Okay, so with that foundation in place, the source then builds its case on two key theological concepts. It uses these principles, one about love, the other about nations, to construct its entire framework for thinking about immigration. So the first concept is a classical one. It's called Ordo Amoris, which is just Latin for the order of loves. Now, this isn't about loving some people and not others. No, not at all. Instead, the source argues that our loves have a kind of natural hierarchy. Our duties aren't just universally equal to everyone everywhere. They are ordered by how close we are to people and the relationships we have. And this slide lays out that hierarchy perfectly. The argument is that our responsibility flows from God, then to our family, then to our church community, and then outward to our fellow citizens. It's not this one-size-fits-all obligation. It's more like a series of concentric circles of duty, starting with the people who are closest to us. And here's how that idea gets applied to national identity. The source reframes patriotism. It says it's not some sinful nationalism, but an ordered affection, basically a form of wise stewardship for your own people. This puts it in direct opposition to what it calls globalism, which it argues wants to dissolve these very loyalties. So building on that, the second big principle defines what a nation even is from this biblical perspective. Drawing on its interpretation of the Tower of Babel story, the source argues that nations, with distinct borders, cultures, and laws, they aren't just historical accidents. It actually sees them as part of a divine design, meant to limit unchecked centralized power. Okay, so we've got the order of loves and a definition of nation all set up. Now the source applies these principles directly to the issue of immigration, and it draws its models from the Old Testament. Now, this slide really gets to the heart of the argument. The source basically outlines two different paths for immigration. The first is a model of assimilation. It's based on the biblical figure Ruth, and it's all about fully joining a people. But the second path is the source's primary concern, a model of immigration that it fears doesn't lead to joining, but to fundamentally transforming or even erasing the host nation's identity. And that leads us directly to the question of enforcement, right? What is the government's role in all of this? Well, the source presents a very specific view on the state's authority to enforce laws and borders. And again, it's all grounded in theology. The argument is that government itself is what it calls a divine delegation. So it's not just some social contract we all came up with. No, it's an institution established by God, specifically for the purpose of administering justice and restraining evil in the world. And this passage from the book of Romans is the scriptural justification the source points to. It argues the government's power, its sword, so to speak, is a God-given authority to enforce laws. So within this framework, securing borders and enforcing immigration law become not just political functions, but actually theological duties. So, based on that framework, the source identifies these specific problems it associates with illegal immigration. It's really careful to frame its concern not as some personal feeling against immigrants, but as an opposition to what it sees as a systemic injustice, a system that, it argues, breaks laws, harms citizens, and ultimately undermines national cohesion. And this brings us to the argument's conclusion. The source contends that our entire public debate on immigration is actually focused on all the wrong things, and that we have to address a much deeper, more fundamental issue first. From this perspective, all of our heated policy debates are just symptoms. The source sees them as downstream from the real conflict, which it says is a fundamental disagreement over what a nation even is. and whether it has the right to exist as its own distinct entity. And this is the argument's crucial pivot. The source insists that before we can even begin to debate policy, we first have to answer these deeper questions about identity. Is it permissible to preserve a national identity? Does national continuity matter? The entire debate just shifts from logistics to philosophy. And that brings us to the final provocative question that the source material leaves us with. By shifting the focus from the mechanics of policy to the very definition of national identity, it challenges us to consider what preservation truly means in the 21st century. It's a question worth reflecting on.